In this video, we're going to take a look and see how to use the Desmos graphing or scientific calculator or your scientific calculator to find the trig ratios of angles that don't have exact values. And we're going to round to 4 decimal places. First example is finding all the trigonometric ratios of 125 degrees given in degree measure. Second example is finding all the trig ratios of 3 pi over 8 given in radian measure. So when we do this, the calculator will have the sine, the cosine, and the tangent functions, but it won't have separate cosecant, secant, and cotangent functions. So you have to use the inverse relationship that the cosecant is 1 divided by the sine, the secant is 1 divided by the cosine, and the cotangent is 1 divided by the tangent. So that will be the same whether in degree or radian measure. So go ahead and open Desmos. Go to desmos.com. The graphing calculator is on the front page, but the math tools, they also have a scientific calculator. So on the scientific calculator, notice we have the trig functions here, sine, cosine, tangent, and then degrees and radians. There are other functions in here as well, so you can explore a little bit, but I'll go back to the main page. So if we want to find the sine, let me scoot this over here, make it small enough. So if we want to find the sine, cosine, and tangent of 125 degrees, we click on sine, make sure you're in degrees, 125, into the parenthesis, and we get 0.8192. If we want the cosine, let me scoot over here, hit enter to get to the next cosine, 125, into parentheses, it shows up over here, hit enter to go to the next line. So if I want cosecant, then I have to type in 1 divided by the sine of 125. And it shows up automatically on the right, so 1.2207. So that's general information, how you find the sine, the cosine, and the reciprocal functions using Desmos. So now we're also going to take a look at what if you're using radians. So the next one, if we're finding trig ratios of 3 pi over 8, so what I need on 3 pi over 8 is to make sure that I'm in radian measure instead. So I'm going to do sine, and I want 3 times pi divided by 8. So 3, then I have to find the pi key. So the pi key is in the functions. There's the pi. And then go back to main, divided by 8. Close your parentheses. So we'll find the sine of 3 pi over 8. And the arrow over and close the big parentheses there. And it's automatically does it. It's 0.9239. If you want to find the cosine, or let's find the tangent. So if we want the tangent of 3 pi over 8, we do 3, pick up pi in the function, 3 pi, go back to the main, divided by 8, and make this a little cleaner. You use that right arrow, and then we can close our parenthesis, which is 2.4142. And then if you want the cotangent, we have to take the reciprocal function, 1 divided by the tangent of 3 pi over 8. Where's my pi? There it is. 3 pi, back to main, divided by 8. And then arrow it over so you can get to the end there in parentheses. All right, so those are the sine, cosine, and tangent functions. So if we want to work backwards, which is the next thing that we want to take a look at, we want to use Desmos to find an angle given the trigonometric ratio and round to 2 decimal places. So if you know that the tangent of an angle is 2.7245, or if you know the cosine of an angle or the sine of an angle, then we have to use what's called the inverse function. So to find the inverse, we use the inverse function, tan negative 1 of 2.7245 is equal to theta. So the inverse function is not to the power of negative 1. It means it's going the opposite direction. So on the Desmos calculator, underneath the functions is where the inverse sine, inverse cosine, and inverse tangent are. So if we want to find the angle that goes with the tangent of 2.7245, we hit inverse tangent. Oh, and I better make sure if I'm in degrees or radians, I want to do this in degrees first. I want the inverse tangent of, then back to the main page, 2.7245 in parentheses, and that gives me approximately 69.84 degrees. So we want these to 2 decimal places. If we want that in radians, we're going to do exactly the same thing. Go to function, inverse tangent, 2.7245 in the parentheses, and now I want that to be in radians instead. Notice it changed everything, so I didn't want to do it right at the beginning there. So if the calculator's in radians, you get 1.219. I guess I didn't need to type it again. Degrees, it's 69.84. Okay, let's try one more. If we want the inverse cosine, let me clear everything. If we want the inverse cosine, oops, wrong function, clear it out. Function, inverse cosine, back to main, 0.4322. In parentheses, in degrees, it's 64.39 degrees. Click over to radians, and it automatically takes it to 1.12 radians.